Hello, everybody. It's Colin here, and welcome to a new episode of the Colin on Culture podcast. Long time listeners will know it as the Culture and Coffee podcast, but we decided just to unify all of our content under the Colin on Culture brand. If you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, which you can do so www.colindellis.com/boom. I'm doing a daily blog now, just an idea or something that you can think about or to change every single day without having to wait a week for a new insight. Today's podcast was actually inspired by two things. It was inspired by a new client, and it was inspired by an advert I heard on the radio. Of course it was. So the new client that I spoke to last week, and she was really open about the culture that she had, which is always great. That's where you want to start, with an honest conversation about where you're at. And she said, if I'm honest, Colin, we're great at investing in our culture, but we're not really invested as a leadership team. And so that was really good. And we had the conversation about, what that looked like. And then I was in the car taking my daughter for some tutoring, and I heard an advert that used the exact same distinction of investing versus invested. And I thought, it's a sign. So let's do a short audio podcast on the difference between investing in culture and invested in culture. A metaphor usually is a good way to kind of bring some clarity very early on about the difference. So investing in a garden is where you plant all the seeds. To be invested in the garden is where you tend to it every day. You're checking the weather, you're checking the soil quality, all of those things, because you want the plants to grow. Being invested is spending time, spending money, buying plants, right? But not really thinking about what you want it to look like, what you want the growth to be. Now, I think many organizations, in fact, I went back in preparation and I looked at the last probably 6-7 years at all of my clients. I tend to work with, about 10, 12 a year over the last eight years, something like that. So I've worked with over 100 clients. That just proving I'm rubbish at maths, because that would be 96 or something like that. I don't know. And I would estimate probably 1 in 10 of those clients was invested in culture before we started to work together. And then the work that we did merely enhanced what they already had or have. I've got 2 of those clients right now who've got really good cultures, and I work with them to continually enhance them, drop in a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of motivation, but also a little bit of accountability too. But 1 in 10. So I think 9 out of 10 of my clients to date have been investing in culture in some way, shape, or form. So what does investing look like? So investing in culture is maybe outsourcing the writing of your values to a consulting company. Maybe you are like, we've asked them to come up with a set of values on our behalf. Investing is having a vision statement that's overly long, that no one can remember and no one can repeat back to you. Investing is having different behavioral rules for your executives. So you've gone to the trouble of actually creating a set of behavioral rules or having a set of policies, for example. But when executives, kind of compromise them, it's not the same as when employees do. That's an example of investing. A good one is promoting people based on length of tenure or technical expertise rather than what they bring and what they add to the culture. Investing is having learning programs or similar that you never ever measure, that actually, again, don't enhance the day-to-day kind of ways of working for the business. Saying that innovation is important, yet having absolutely no time whatsoever to do anything. Saying that people are your most important asset, which is always a good thing to say, right? It's a sign that you're really investing thought into this, but then piling loads of work on them. So these are examples of where organizations are investing in culture. So we would know it as they talk the talk, but being invested in culture is walking the walk. And so that's generally this distinction between the two. Now for organizations that are invested in culture, what they do is they take the time to actually read, educate themselves. They want to know that any investment that they make in culture, right? So we use the word invest. Any investment that they make will actually pay them back. And interestingly, I'm in talks at the minute with an education institution, and the person that I'm speaking to is 100% invested in it. And what he wants is, as a start point, is to help me get other people invested in it too, by, kind of giving them some data, some empirical evidence. So, for example, there was a great piece of research called Corporate Culture: Evidence from the Field, which demonstrates, and they use all these Harvard metrics that demonstrates that culture is the foundation of all companies, and the culture can make or break the success of an organization. And often when people, and I will do it in this case, is I'll break it down, make it simple to understand, and then I'll give them all of the information that they need. And that's usually then the distinction between whether they're investing or whether they're invested. If they're invested, they'll read the evidence, because they want to make sure that they're spending money on the right things. It's also looking at statistics like, 85% of people believe that a poorly implemented, ineffective culture creates conditions where employees might behave unethically or behave poorly. They'll do some research that finds out that, kind of 68% of leaders say that executive behavior is the top indicator of a good culture or not. So all of these things, if your organization is invested in culture, they'll really take the time and the effort to understand, well, why should we do this? Why should we spend this money? And I joked recently with my wife. I went to a potential client meeting, and she said, "How was it?" I was like, "I got a proper grilling." She was like, "Oh, what was that like?" I was like, "It was great." It was great because I want to know that they're invested in what this could be. That's what I want. I want that grilling, right? I've got all of the stats. I've got all of the data. I've got all of the case studies of organizations that I've worked with and what they've been able to achieve because they invested in culture. So I think, one of the things to look out for is this in your organization, is the difference between the two. Is your organization investing in culture, or is it invested? Is it all in? Is it something that the CEO is talking about and then you see everybody else do? And I've gone on record before. Red Bull is one of my clients, perhaps my favorite client to work with. And the reason that they're my favorite client to work with is the CEO is invested in culture. And then all of his executive team, they call them head coaches, they are all invested in culture. Like, I can't praise them highly enough. And whenever I go and do bits and pieces of work around the world with different teams, I can always come back to that because I know it for a fact. I've been there, I've worked with those guys. They're 100% invested in it. And so what you want to do is you really want to work for an organization that's invested in the culture in the future, because this is where happiness, this is where productivity lies. As I've mentioned before in previous mediums, is nobody wants to come to work and not contribute to the success of either the team or the organization or something. No, everyone wants to be able to draw this straight line between the work that they do and how it benefits the organization or the team, because they know that when organizations are invested in culture and they achieve the results that they're looking for, then employees are rewarded. Not necessarily you get more money, but there's an enhancement in the culture. So, one of the clients that I'm working with right now, we've been working together for 3 years. They brought me back in to do some more work this year. And that's that. They're continually invested in it. Say, we've got those results, we've got but we just need you to come along every now and again, just pump the tires up, remind me why we're here, and for me, I want the staff to be invested, so I give them agency over the things that they want me to talk about. And I do these sessions every month where I just kind of drop in, here's something, but because they're invested, everybody shows up on these virtual sessions. Everybody shows up. It's not okay. I remember speaking to someone once. They're like, "Oh, do you ever have a problem with people turning up for virtual sessions?" I was like, "No, I don't." But then that's because I give kind of the client agency on. You come up with the subject, and I'll kind of talk about it, and I'll write it, and I'll do it. on your behalf. So I think that, here's a negative example that I have. It's not all roses. Now I'm using the gardening metaphor. So I had one HR director. The CEO was invested in culture. It was a new CEO. I met with him and he was really good. And he was like, Colin, I understand, he's very direct. I understand that culture will be my legacy. I only want to do this job for 5 years. I want to make sure that my team are doing everything that we can to make this investment in culture. Yes, we've got to hit the results, but, I want people to remember us for the environment that we built. I was like, great, did that. I met with the HR director and these were literal words. It's my job to pay for the program and it's your job to deliver it. Okay. I was like, great. Yeah. Happy with that. We'd outlined this big program of work over a period of about 12 months. And so after the first month, we'd done the first workshop. We got some great feedback. And I said, let's meet, let's talk about it. She was like, I just want to remind you, it's my job to pay for it. It's your job to deliver it. And we didn't meet. We didn't meet once over that 12-month period. I met her once in the corridor and I was like, are you happy with everything's going? She's like, my answer to that? I was like, okay, just get walking. And that was fine. And the program was great. It went really, really well, but she didn't want to know. Just didn't want to know for whatever reason, just did not want to know. And it wasn't like she was getting it from somebody else. She was like, my job to pay for it, your job to deliver it. And when she said your job, my approach is to teach people within the organization how to do it themselves. So you're not reliant on me for years 2 onwards. And so we were really happy, but that was a good example. And actually some of the feedback that we got, because I encourage a kind of quarterly pulse reviews into culture. And some of the feedback that we got was the leadership team weren't as trusted as they once were. And so that was really interesting. We played that back and, we talked about what that would look like. Did anything change? Not necessarily, because not everybody was invested in it. And that was one of those rare cases where the CFO was invested from day one. Usually the CFO, any CFOs listen to this, don't take this the wrong way. But as CFOs, you ask all the questions. You want to make sure if you're spending a ton of money on culture, you want to make sure there's some payback. And of course there will be payback, but not immediately. Like it's going to be 3-6 months. And if you stay the course, if you, keep the faith, you'll get there. And if we hold people accountable to the promises that we've made. But that's it. In that instance, the CFO was 100% invested. So this is just a short little piece about the difference between investing in culture and being invested. So if you're a leader, if you're a team leader, what do you need to think about? Well, you need to think about the fact that it's not enough just to talk about culture. Saying culture is the most important thing is one thing, but staff are actually looking for you to be invested in it. And what that looks like is you actually taking time out of your day, week, month, whatever, to openly ask for feedback, to create events that enhance the culture, to make sure that you're not allowing anybody to undermine the culture, to hold people to account to it. Any measurement that happens, that you look at the feedback, you decide what you're going to do, you give staff agency or employees agency on what you're going to actually do about all of that. And I think one of the questions I often get asked is, well, how do we make culture stick? And the way that you make culture stick is by being invested. Not just financially, but an annual program events. I often talk about micro experiences. These are the things that really make culture stick, and it's simple. It's really simple. Being invested is knowing when everybody's birthday is, and kind of wishing them a happy birthday or whatever it is. Being invested is never being in a bad mood, always saying good morning. Being invested is getting away from your desk or where you're most comfortable and going out and seeing the people of your team and actually reconnecting with them. Being invested in culture is being a sounding board for your people. Being invested in culture is actually being a bit of a quality filter, and saying things like, if you want me to check anything, if you want me to read anything, I'm here to help you. I had one manager once, he was like, oh, should I ask to see the presentation? I was like, of one of the staff members, like, you should ask for it if they want your help. right? And then if they present it, you've got feedback, give that in the moment. That's what being invested in culture. But, investing in culture is waiting for a 6-12 month annual review. That's investing in it by basically saying, well, we've got this review process and it's good enough, but it's too late. Being invested is, I'm going to give you some feedback in the moment, or, kind of after something's happened, to be able to enhance the way that you do things tomorrow. And that's that real distinction between investing in culture and being invested in it. Hope you enjoyed today's session. See you soon.